Hello and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV, where we are going to be discussing something that I get a lot of questions about in my inbox, and that is specifically, how do you arrange your fingers to play chords? So I see a lot of crazy configurations with playing chords, and we're going to get into like how do you play root position chords, different kinds of inversions, as well as 4-note chords, and talk a little bit about wrist rotation and best practices. So really simple video, but hopefully this is helpful to some of you. Let's get started. All right, we are ready to go at my keyboard. So the very first point of discussion when we're doing our chords and how to use your fingers and what fingers to use for different chord combinations, we're just gonna start really simple with root position triads. Triad is just a 3-note chord. And root position just means it's like its home base. So C chord in home base has this kind of shape where there's a gap in between each note. It's like a 1-3-5 shape. It's a very nice, symmetrical, happy shape. So the fingering for, you'd think that the fingering for a chord like this, pretty straightforward overall. Not so. Because what I've seen so many times, and this is one cautionary thing to watch out for those of you who play the bass guitar or the regular guitar, is sometimes I'll see this. Where I see 4-3-2 fingers, and then the pinky and the thumb are just kind of flying out to the side. This is so common with string instrument players because they're used to oftentimes basically just like stretching out their hand really wide for like different chord combos. So they don't really have as much natural dexterity in the pinky and the thumb. So it's pretty typical for you to see them play chords like this. If that is you, you really want to, in order to learn a proper shape with your hand in piano, you really need your pinky and your thumb on the keys. So basic tips about this shape. If you're playing your 5-3 in one finger, the 2 and basically the 2 and the 4, the fingers that are not playing, they can just hover over. That's fine. You don't need to keep them like sitting on the keys. I think that would be really awkward. When I play a chord, my fingers usually sit about here. I mean, it might be awkward if your fingers are way up like this. That might be wasting energy. But a little bit of a hover while you play those chords is more than enough. And I do notice that sometimes my pointer finger goes up that it hasn't seemed to just it's almost like a spasm. It's like I can't even control it when I'm playing that chord. And that has not caused me any problems. Same thing in the right hand. Just keeping your fingers that are not playing lightly held over. You shouldn't really, these fingers should feel pretty loose, the ones that aren't playing. So if they're pointing really hard, like they're, I don't know, pointing somewhere like on a mission, that's again a waste of energy. You don't want that. That's going to create tension in your hand shape. So I just like to keep the non-playing fingers just loose, but slightly raised so they don't accidentally mush down in the chord with you. Final note on triads and root position shapes. I didn't realize like my second finger is so twitchy. This is a new thing for me. You learn new things every day. The other thing is just take a look at where your hand shape is based on where your fingers are on the keys. So I like to, the natural shape that I like to go with is having my pinky and my thumb roughly in the same spot on the edge of the white keys. And then my third finger, it's a bigger finger, so it's naturally just going to be a little higher, but never past the line of the black line, basically. So you don't want to play a chord where your middle finger is like way up here, like kind of getting deep into the keys. You want to keep it below this invisible line where the white and black keys meet. So it just has like a slightly triangular shape. The reason that I like to keep my pinky and my thumb back a little bit is because if you play the fingers really high, like the thumb and the pinky, it's so much easier to make mistakes. It's hard to press that middle finger properly when it's this deep in the keys, so you get incomplete sounding chords. Your nicest sound and the best control is going to be with your pinky and your thumb held back. I do something similar in my right hand. I do notice that my pinky tends to come a little higher in the right hand, but it's still pretty low on the white key. Now, if I'm playing a chord like D major, you're going to see that exact same shape. The only difference is my middle finger's on a black key. So I've got my pinky and my thumb are pretty low on the keys, and then my third finger stretched out. Same thing on the right hand. My thumb and my pinky are pretty low on the white keys, and then my middle finger stretched out to the black key. Now, the only time that this changes with triads, you do have some weird chords. So for example, you have B major triad. This is a really awkward shape to play. If you play this with a 1-3-5, your thumb ends up having to travel to a black key, which is not ideal because your thumb is the shortest. It's not even technically a finger, but whatever it is, it's the shortest digit. So to get it on the black key, you really have to like hoist your wrist so that your thumb can even get there. This is really kind of an awkward shape. So what I see a lot of students do, and I've done this myself, is actually just leaving the thumb alone and just doing 5-3-2 in the left hand, or in the right hand. You can get away with using your pinky, I find, because the pinky's a little longer, but you'll also see people use this shape, 1-2-4, with this particular triad, just because it is a really weird triad. So a general rule of thumb is we want to avoid, we can't always, but whenever we can, we do want to avoid putting our thumb or our pinky on a black key, because just like they're so much shorter. Like the pinky has a little more leeway because it's a little longer than the thumb. But the thumb is like such a shrimp compared to the rest. So if we have to put the thumb on a black key, we have to it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of effort. And you're more likely to make mistakes if you do that. So let's move on to chord inversions. So an inversion is just when you take the root position triad and you mix around the notes and you rearrange the order, but it's still the same chord. So this is inversion 1 and this is inversion 2. So when you have a chord shape that has a space between the first 2 notes and then 2 notes space, I like to just do a simple 5-3-1. However, if it's the reverse shape where you have a gap of 2 notes and then a gap of 1 note, I like to actually shift my fingering to 5-2-1 in the left hand. The reason being, the thumb is able to stretch pretty far. Okay, so what we're doing here is we have a 2-note gap, but we basically only, like our thumb is having to extend. So this is our natural hand shape, but to get it into an inverted shape and stretch it out a little farther, you just have to stretch the thumb further. But that's actually pretty easy to do because the thumb is limber. However, in this configuration, we want to have we basically, the fingers on the bottom half of your hand don't really stretch that well. So it's easier to, if we tried to do 1-3-5 here, all of a sudden we have a 2-note gap between the pinky and finger 3, which is super awkward. This is just a really uncomfortable shape. I feel a lot of tension when I do this because these fingers do not like to stretch very much. But when it comes to the thumb, again, the thumb is really stretchy. So when I'm doing a second inversion type chord, whether it's here or maybe it's here, or maybe it's, let me think about this, here, I'm always playing 5-2-1 instead of 5-3-1. Okay, so what if you're doing an inverted chord? Actually, let me just show you that in the right hand. It's pretty much the same idea, right? We don't do 5-3-1 when you have an extra gap between fingers 5 and 3. This is super awkward and uncomfortable. So in this case, we would do 5-2-1. But this chord, it's easy enough to do 5-3-1 because the thumb is covering that extra distance because the thumb is nice and stretchy. So what about if you have a chord that inverts with a black key? So let's say we're doing a D major chord. The first inversion of a D major chord starts on a black key, has a white key in the middle, and then a white key at the top. So you can play it like this. You can go 5-3-1. It's not breaking any rules. You're not doing anything illegal. The pinky is capable of this. It is a little awkward. So what a lot of people find more comfortable is to do 4-2-1 and just leave the pinky out of it, because finger 4 is a little bit more nimble. It's a little longer, and the thumb doesn't have any issues doing that extra stretch. The thumb can handle that. It's just more of an issue of if your pinky, like what kind of shape. This is a little bit of a nicer, more relaxed hand shape than this. I find this to be a trickier configuration. You can see the same thing in the right hand. When you do the first inversion of D, you can put your thumb on the black key. I wouldn't really recommend it because, again, if we can avoid having the thumb on a black key, it just makes our hand twist in this really weird way. It's doable, but we have to really crank our wrist in order to hoist our thumb up there. So maybe an easier way to play that chord would be to omit the thumb entirely and just use fingers 2, 4, and 5. So this is one of those moments where it's kind of a tough call, because if you do that, then all of a sudden finger 3 and 5 have this really big gap. And as you remember, these fingers aren't really that stretchy. So it's kind of hard for these fingers to do a stretch, but you're trying to decide, okay, what's the lesser of two evils? Is it harder for you to do the thumb and have a comfortable stretch? You don't have like a weird pinky stretch, but you do have a weird thumb placement. Or is it more comfortable for you to stretch finger 3 and 5 and leave your thumb out of the equation? This is honestly, like, you could just, either way would be correct as far as I'm concerned. Now, when you're doing the second inversion, you're in kind of a similar boat. Usually I play this one with the thumb, weirdly enough, just because I find it easier to tilt my left hand thumb in this direction. That's a pretty doable shape. But just like we were talking about with the right hand, you could experiment with a 5-3-2 pattern instead. I find this stretch between the pinky and finger 3 to be like not worth it. It's not like that part of my hand hates stretching. It's uncomfortable. So this is the lesser of two evils where I'm concerned. This is a situation where it's not gonna like break the bank for your thumb to be on that black key. In the right hand, either way, that's kind of 50-50 to me. And then when you have this second inversion where the top note's a black key, well, try it out. If you use your pinky, how does that feel versus using 1-2-4? For me, I really like this 1-2-4 shape. I could do the 1-3-5, but it does create some tension in my hand. So when I'm doing triads in D, I might go something like this. Thumb, 1-2-4, root. So it's just a regular 1-3-5 shape. Thumb 2-5, thumb 2-4, thumb 3-5. That's the way that I'd prefer to do it. And then in the left hand, I'm doing 5-3-1, 4-2-1, 5-2-1, and back to root. Those are my preferred ways to use the fingering. Now, finally, when you are doing 4-note chords, everything kind of changes, because we have a lot less, when you're playing four notes in a chord at once, you can't really switch around your fingers very easily. So the first one that I'm going to start with is just a regular 7 chord. It's a G chord plus the 7th. So this is a G7. I mean, you only have 5 fingers, so you don't have that many options. The best option with this shape would be 5-3-2-1. Again, because you really don't want to have to make finger 4 do a stretch from the pinky. It's just basically the pinky half of your hand doesn't like to stretch. So if you can avoid doing that, it's better. And your thumb is stretchy, so your thumb doesn't have any problem with that. So for a basic 7 chord, I would just do 1-2-3-5, 5-3-2-1, basically completely omit finger 4. There are exceptions. So if I was doing a half diminished chord, for example, and the bottom note was a black key, I might opt to use finger 4 instead, because I just find that a more comfortable shape. But oftentimes in 4-note chords, especially if you're doing root position chords, you're not going to use your finger 4. In the right hand, you might use finger 4 if, say, your top note's a black key. I'm just playing a major 7th right now. You might find that easier than hoisting your pinky up. So that might be an instance where instead of using, instead of omitting finger 4, you might use it if the top note happens to be a black key. Now, if you have 4-note chords that are inverting, so here's my G7. I'm going to just take all those notes and reconfigure them. Notice finger 4 is getting ignored. I'm going to take all 4 of those notes and rearrange them. Notice finger 4 getting ignored. The only time I really use it is when it makes sense. So in this 4-note chord, I have 2 notes that are right beside each other. So it wouldn't make any sense to leave out finger 4 in this instance because there's no gap. Same thing with the right hand. 1-2-3-5. This is where I'm using finger 4 because these notes are literally right beside each other. So same kind of thing. But then 1-2-3-5, 1-2-3-5. I'm basically omitting finger 4 wherever I can in 4-note chords. Exceptions being when 2 notes are pinched right together, or if you happen to have like a black key at the top or of the right hand or the bottom of the left hand, which is when that would make sense. Just key things to keep in mind when you're doing It's like, if I'm to highlight the main points from this, guitar hands, get your pinkies and your thumbs on the keyboard. That's going to give you a better hand shape. When you're deciding chords, remember that and how to finger them, remember that your thumb stretches a way bigger distance than your pinky. So always opt for, whenever you have a bigger gap in your notes, always opt for covering that gap with your thumb. As opposed to the bottom half of your hand. 4-note chords, we basically try to not use finger 4 unless we absolutely have to, and try not to put your thumb and your pinky on black keys. But there are going to be situations when you do, and then it's just kind of a judgment call when it makes sense. And as a final note, don't allow your fingers to go too deep into the keys. I don't want to see you playing chords like this, where your fingers are way up into the black. Basically, consider the line, like the edge where the white keys meet the black keys, to be about your boundary. When you're doing black key chords, your finger's pretty much going to be on the edge of the black key. It's not like you're going to be playing it like this, where your finger's really deep on that black key. We're keeping it pretty much to the edge. So the range where you play keys for your inner fingers is kind of this like narrow band where the white and black keys meet. And then your thumb and pinkies tend to stay towards the edge. So anyway, hopefully that gives you a few ideas on how to configure your fingers for chords. Thank you so much for watching today's video. You can check out some of the other 450 plus videos on pianoTV. We have playlists and a website, pianotv.net, where all of these videos are linked, often with text transcripts or blog posts of the content if you prefer it in that format. So do check that out and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next episode.